begin by inviting the chairman of the World Forum for Sri Lankan Muslims to address you all. Please welcome Mr. Rizwan Wahab.
Assalamu alaikum.
Walaikum salam.
You all can hear me, please?
Yes.
Right, thank you. Right, my name is Rizwan Wahab. I'm the chairman of the World Forum for Sri Lankan Muslims. We are an organization spread around the world, around 32 countries. And the membership is all expatriate community, where our services are both for expatriate and Sri Lankan community. And we have been here for about 10 years now. And we started around 2003, but actually it was launched in 2019. Since then, it has been active, and our headquarters in Covent Garden in London, United Kingdom. And my greetings to all of you from London. Let me start welcoming all of you. On behalf of the organizing committee of the World Forum for Sri Lankan Muslims, I would like to warmly welcome all of you on the Women's Day panel discussion. The theme, rightly chosen, desire to inspire. I believe desire to achieve, inspire to lead. The desire to inspire theme reminds us that when one woman rises with confidence and passion, she inspires many others to rise with her. Today, we come together not only to celebrate the International Women's Day, but also to honor the courage, the leadership, and achievement of women across every field and every corner of the world. I would especially like to thank the incredible World Forum team, Gender Equality, and the Strategic Communication team. GE is led by Rizana Zubair, very active member of the World Forum for many years, and she took over from Ziada Toki. And the young and active Sharif D. Shazmina, she took over not long ago from the media team. They collaborated and their dedication and creativity and hard work making this event possible. From planning and coordinating to outreach and logistic.
Yeah, I see what you're saying, but that might fluster, isn't it? Although she doesn't appear
there's some
to be on the
sound
screen.
behind.
She doesn't seem. Oh no, she is.
Could everyone please mute your
There is
microphone?
some disturbance, Tasmina.
Yes.
Is it okay to continue? Okay. Hello?
Yeah, you can continue, Brother Rizwan.
Yeah, can I continue?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes, please. Yeah.
From planning to coordination to outreach and logistic, your commitment has brought us together for what promises to be an inspiring and meaningful conversation today. We are deeply honored to be joined by an outstanding panel of women leaders and professionals, each bringing unique experience, expertise, and global perspective. Your presence reminds us that women leadership is powerful, diverse, and essential in shaping stronger communities and a more just world. Today, the discussion is more than a panel. It is a platform the World Forum is providing for sharing stories, challenging barriers, and uplifting one another. It's a reminder that when women support women, incredible change happens. To everyone attending today, thank you for being part of this celebration. Your engagement, your voice, and your support are what make a movement like World Forum Sri Lankan Muslim grow. Let us listen, learn, and leave inspired to continue advocating for equality, opportunity, and empowerment for all women and girls. Thank you very much. Thank you for the opportunity for me to welcome all of you today. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Chairman Mr. Rizwan Wahab. Enlightening words as always, sir. So let's get this show on the road. I am in the midst of 4 powerhouses, 4 powerful women leaders who have made an impact on our world. Let me first introduce panelist Farzana Jamil, President's Counsel, who has dedicated over 3 decades to public service in Sri Lanka's Attorney General's Department. She has also served internationally as a Justice of Appeal in Fiji and continues to contribute to the legal field through her work with the Law Commission of Sri Lanka and as an arbitrator. With her expertise spanning constitutional law, administrative law, public law, and international trade, Farzana brings a wealth of knowledge and experience to today's discussion. Welcome, Farzana. I'd like to start asking you your first question. Farzana, throughout your career, you've worked extensively in constitutional and administrative law. How do you see the legal system, and in particular public law, evolving to better protect and empower women in Sri Lanka and beyond?
Let me say thank you to the World Muslim Forum for having me on today. And I would say like to say thank you to Mr. Rizwan Wahab, Chairman, Mrs. Rizana Zubair, the head of the Gender Equality Committee, and of course to you, Tassie, the energetic lady leading us today. So to answer your question, it's like this. How I see the legal system evolving is your question, to better protect and empower women. So the legal system's evolution on gender equity, I would say equity rather than equality, because I don't think we need an identical framework that we have for the men. Equity is not linear. So it moves in surges. It is often driven by litigation and less by legislation. So what gives me kind of cautious optimism is this, that we see that there's constitutional litigation nowadays, which is becoming a powerful instrument. We have seen in the recent past judicial decisions that have produced outcomes that statutes and laws alone could not have delivered. In other words, judges have become more forthright. They see the difficulty. So whether it's about workplace dignity or whether it's about discriminatory administrative action or whether it's about procedural fairness in matters that directly affect women's lives and their livelihoods, there is a kind of change from the judicial direction. For women specifically, I see that the most significant aspect of evolution will come from 3 directions. One is the mainstreaming of proportionality review in public law, in administrative law, so that decisions which affect women's access to employment, access to licenses, land rights, state benefits would no longer be examined only for procedural unfairness. Courts will, I think, go beyond that and look for substantive justification as well. They will ask for substantive justification. Secondly, there is the need to dismantle what we call the personal laws. The personal laws, Sri Lanka being a multi-ethnic, multi-religious country and having been colonized 3 times over, we have a mix of personal laws. So we have the Muslim law, the Kandyan law, the Tesavadami, and of course the general law. Now, unfortunately for us, we have an article in the Constitution, which is Article 16(1), which prevents the amendment of existing laws, even if those existing laws are contrary to the guaranteed rights set out in Article 12 of the Constitution, which says that nobody will be discriminated on the basis of race, gender, sex, all of that. However, we have this other foundational bar which prevents personal laws or any other, whatever the law may be, if it is in place, the movement, the taking away of the law requires legislation. So that you can't go back and rewrite the law. And we don't have judicial review of legislation like, say, in India or in any other country. So once a law is in place, you can't take the law to court and agitate the law. You can only repeal the law and bring in a new law. So we have that disadvantage. But I see that there is that dismantling of personal laws. The other way I see this evolution of the law happening is going from my experience as a litigator for the state and having served rather briefly as a judge in the Court of Appeal in Fiji. I have seen that my experience is that when women occupy the bench, meaning the judicial office or the bar, or they are in legislative drafting officers, the lived experiences of those women does shape to some extent the legal interpretation that is needed. And so that's not an ideology, that is really common sense. So I also believe that there'll be one more evolutionary change as I see it, and that is alternate dispute resolution becoming more mainstream. So you see a kind of a slight expansion, a kind of a revolutionary expansion of mediation as an alternate dispute resolution method coming in. So when you look at how the laws are going to evolve or how the system is going to evolve for the benefit of women, I see the exponential growth of mediation as a means of dispute resolution. And for decades, we lawyers have been trained to accept that litigation is the only way to resolve disputes. But now there's this slight revolutionary shift. And the movement is moving away from being a legal combatant to being a facilitator of a resolution. So it transforms legal battles into opportunities for resolution. And maybe this is eventually going to be the strength of the legal profession, because as things now seem to be moving, the most powerful lawyer is no longer the one who wins the longest battle, even after a most eloquent speech, but rather the one who resolves the conflict with the least amount of emotional and financial strain. So in my view, I see this movement in mediation as being an evolutionary change that will come to change the lives of women and how women will be seen in situations of conflict. And this will become a more sustainable, speedier, more effective, and less emotionally traumatic way of dealing with disputes. Thank you.
Thank you, Fazal. That's a very powerful perspective because it highlights how the law can be both a safeguard and a catalyst for change when it comes to women's rights.
Exactly.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Our next panelist is Farah Farooq, Chief Executive Officer of the Ethnic Communities Council of Victoria, known as the ECCV. With a career spanning journalism, NGO leadership, and now multicultural advocacy, Farah brings a wealth of experience in championing migrant and refugee communities. We're delighted to have her with us today. Farah, as the new CEO of ECCV, we're so proud of you. How do you see the role of multicultural advocacy evolving in addressing the intersection of gender and cultural diversity in Australia?
Hello from Melbourne, Australia. Thank you for the opportunity to be with these starry women. I really appreciate that you pulled me in. It's 9 p.m.-ish. It's actually 9:15 here in Melbourne. I think Sri Lankans know a fair bit about Australia. It is geographically an Asian country, but culturally it's been seen as due to colonization, a European sort of outpost. It's one where there are many, I'm just giving you a little bit of context. Many Sri Lankans have also settled, firstly, in different waves. And we have a small but, potent Sri Lankan Muslim population, of which I'm one. And I'm the CEO of the Ethnic Communities Council of Victoria, which is a very grassroots focused organization that is the peak body for ethnic communities. There are more than 300 languages spoken here in Victoria, and people wouldn't, where I'm based, one of the states of Australia. There are 6 states, and there are other jurisdictions as well. And so people don't realize that Australia is very much a migrant country. Close to half of the population is born overseas or has a parent born overseas. So that's really interesting, isn't it? But I don't think people contextualize Australia in that way. And so I think that the issues of gender and gender equality and multiculturalism are very intertwined. In debate now, we hear a lot about the intersectional lens, which means excuse me, different diversities coming together. Sorry. Gender equality cannot be addressed in isolation from culture, and the migration experience, language barriers, and socioeconomic factors are very intertwined. Women from migrant and refugee backgrounds often face layered challenges, from discrimination and limited access to services to underrepresentation in leadership. So I think that you can't sort of take one factor and just talk about that. Multicultural communities often have an element of patriarchy, that P word again, because often coming from traditional cultures where I don't think this is religious, quite frankly, but cultural factors sort of repeat. And so we tend to see, even though often in communities, women are doing a lot of the heavy lifting, the men are speaking. But we're seeing those shifts. And I know that here in our Sri Lankan Muslim community, so many wonderful female leaders. I want to acknowledge Rizana and my own cousin Ziada amongst them. So it's wonderful to see women, capable women, actually taking the opportunity to lead. They have more than the competence, but it's just a question of the opportunity. And one of my key messages is that we must all seize those opportunities. We can't just wait for the uncles to let us step up. So that's one of my key messages for today. Multicultural advocacy, with women coming to the fore, must evolve beyond representation, though, to actively shaping policy. It's not just enough to have women in representative roles. As Farzana noted, though, when women are in representative roles, change does follow because there's a different perspective that comes from that. And that's really powerful. But we can't just accept merely representation. I think that's really an important point. My organisation, the Ethnic Communities Council of Victoria, works to ensure that multicultural perspectives are embedded across government decision-making and the delivery of key services. And so that in policy areas, that gender lens can be reflected. Just this week, for International Women's Day, I met with the co-chairs of here in my state, the Multicultural Alliance of Women Against Family Violence, which is family violence, domestic violence. And it's so important to see those grassroots women, volunteers, agitating, because the wins aren't there yet. Even though here in Australia, it's generally, fares quite well on gender, determinants. It's still one where we have, male dominance, and it's important that women also share in the power. So I took up this role as the CEO because I wanted to make a contribution in that space, and we represent all communities. Not just Muslim communities, the range, the post-war migrants, Italians and Greek communities, Orthodox Christians to Buddhists, Hindus, Jewish communities. And, you'd be surprised how much commonality those communities have in terms of the dynamics around gender. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you, Farah. I'm surprised, 300 languages. That was something I wasn't expecting. So it's clear that leadership in multicultural advocacy isn't just about representation. That's what I'm hearing you saying. It's more about shaping the system so that women from diverse backgrounds can actually thrive. So thank you so much for the work you're doing. Thank you. Next, let's turn our attention to Tamina Rao, an emerging leader and distinguished public figure born in Oslo to Sri Lankan parents. She serves as an elected official on the Oslo City Council and is the spokesperson for urban development and housing for the Oslo Labour Party. Wow. With a background in neurobiology, Tamina brings a unique scientific lens to her political work, alongside her experience as a startup leader, an educator, and advocate for societal reform. Tamina, as a young leader of Sri Lankan heritage in Norway, How do you see your role in shaping more inclusive urban development and housing policy?
Well, first of all, Assalamu alaikum, and thank you so much for having me on this panel. I feel very honored being in the same digital space as so many other wonderful women, especially this weekend where we're approaching the Women's Day. First of all, I would say I think it's not necessarily connected to my field, which is urban development and housing. But in general, I do see that the knowledge of diversity and the knowing of different needs that are out there has truly been an absolute resource for myself. Because I think what is important to remember is that the Norwegian demographic is quite different than, for example, the Australian one. Here, we're only 5.6 million people. People of immigrant background are less than 20%. The Muslims are only at about 3-4%. So immigration and diversity is still quite young and new in this country, meaning that representation is smaller, but yet so important, especially considering that the state of the world that we're in right now. And I think also Norway is at this place where we're handling a quite big demographic challenge, meaning that we're now seeing new needs that we didn't have 20 years ago. And one quite specific example is that now we're at like second, third generation of immigrants. And so our first generation immigrants are becoming older and their needs are different than what the Norwegian health system is built for. So one very specific example is that when I'm around talking to people, even my aunties and uncles at dinner parties, one of their main concerns is getting dementia. Apart from the fact that getting dementia is a big toll on a person's life, their main concern is they're so scared that they would, because you forget the thing that you learn the newest or the latest, and then they're so afraid that the Norwegian healthcare system would not be able to deal with them if they forget Norwegian. So what do you do when you can only speak Tamil, for example? And this is a very new challenge. And therefore, I think it's super important that we have a diverse representation also in policymaking and within our politicians. And just to give you guys an example, we have one person in parliament with Sri Lankan background, and in the largest city, in the capital city, which is Oslo, where I am, we're only 2 representatives. So altogether, you would say that like the 3 most powerful Sri Lankan politicians or politicians with Sri Lankan background in Norway were only 3 women. So that just tells you something about the Norwegian context. And also I want to kind of sum it up. I think Farah said it very nicely, that when women are in representative roles, change follows. And I'm not sure if I think it has something to do with our nature. I feel women mostly are doers. We see a challenge and we see even obstacles and problems before they emerge. Maybe it's our female intuition, I'm not sure. But however, I think that is so important to remember. And I hope that everyone who's in this digital space, even if they're policymakers or lawmakers or in whichever field they are, I really hope that when we leave and log out of Zoom today, that you leave with a sense of a feeling that your voice and your existence is so important if you want to drive global change. And specifically for me, I'm very concerned with injustice and global injustice. And I think we need more powerful female voices to make that change come through.
Wonderful. Thank you, Tamina. You've really shown us how representation in politics can directly influence the way cities can grow and serve diverse communities. Thank you so much, and congratulations for being one of 3. Please meet panelist Samira Mahbuddin. a trailblazer at the intersection of psychology, criminology, and forensics. As a PhD candidate and founder of Viridian Academy, she has combined rigorous research with institutional leadership. Samira also leads international humanitarian missions through Global Sumud and serves as a master trainer in disaster response. Beyond her professional achievements, she's a proud mother of two, grounding her work in resilience and empathy. Samira, welcome. You've carved out a rare academic path across psychology, criminology, and forensics. What inspired you to pursue this unique combination, and how does it shape your perspective on justice and society?
Thank you, Aunt Tassie, for the wonderful introduction, and assalamu alaikum and good evening, everyone. So I'm really honored to be among women who are inspiring the world and leading industries that has been led by men exactly. So talking about criminology and psychology, growing up with that famous five and Sherlock Holmes, and I was always a kid that who asked the question why. So I was aspiring to become a doctor, but later I did not qualify in my A-levels. So that's something that I wanted to, stress about for the youngsters, that people who are focusing on A-levels and all-levels, when they just don't get through that, they feel that it's just done. So I was there at that moment, and my father, who is the one who inspired me to pursue the psychological part and the criminological part, because he was involved in conflict management with the police, and I saw a lot of people getting help. So I thought, though I couldn't go through this medical college, so I thought like, why not psychology? Because that helps a lot of people. So that made me understand myself, because I diagnosed myself with ADHD and a spectrum of autism later in my life, learning psychology. And forensic and criminology is mainly because my professor, Dr. Anusha Adrisinghe, who is one of the leading women in criminology in Sri Lanka, she inspired me to pursue a career in criminology and forensic side. So we are 4 women in Sri Lanka. We have 4 women in this area. And I'm the very first Muslim woman who is pursuing a career in criminology and forensic side. And I want young people to carry out this academic side. It's very interesting. It's very new. And it's always like, you find something new. So I'm not someone who would choose to sit in a desk and do a desk work because of my ADHD, because sitting in one place is very hard for me. So this forensic and psychology, for combining this criminology, allows me to be in the field and interact with people who need help, because the current system here in Sri Lanka, when it comes to offenders and people who are prosecuted, they need the aspect of psychological profiling. So I'm an advocate for someone who is working in the field of reducing recidivism, that is the repetence of crimes, and offender victimization. So all these aspects of my academic background allows me to help a lot of people, and I think it shows something that women can do anything if they want to, if they try very hard.
Thank you, Samira. You're definitely not somebody who wants to sit down. I know you. I've never seen anyone as active as Samira Menkuddin in my life. But thank you, Samira. I'm going to jump over to Tamina. Tamina, your academic training is in neurobiology. How has your scientific background influenced the way you approach policymaking and public discourse?
I think this is quite an interesting question. To understand it, you need to know a little bit more about me, because I have been in politics for many, many years. I started in youth politics when I was 13. So I've always been politically engaged throughout my educational career as well. And subhanAllah, things kind of aligned as I just finished up my master's thesis and I hadn't landed a permanent job yet. And then that same year, a few months later, I became an elected official, and then I was introduced with this job opportunity of becoming a full-time politician working with urban development and housing. And so I kind of pivoted towards doing more of politics, even though like I've been doing both at the same time for many years. I think doing neurobiology, and maybe Samira would also kind of resonate with this, doing psychology, is that you have a greater understanding of human behavior. And that is very important, especially being a politician, not because you can only analyze others, but you also understand their needs in a different way by the way they act and react towards not only policies, but also the different changes that are happening in our societies. And the second part of it is that I'm a nerd. I love reading. I love learning new things. I was also, Samira, a kid that would always ask the question, why? And I think having that ability of never being full enough, never being content by just one answer, wanting to dive into details, has truly been one of the greatest assets of my professional political career, because if you want to make a change, you have to go through all the details to find the loopholes and also the possibilities that lie there. So being a nerd has definitely been the most important thing from my neurobiology career.
Thank you, Tamina. That's fascinating. You're bringing evidence-based thinking into decisions that affect everyday lives, that's really, really cool. Samira, through your Global Sumud work and your work with the pro-Palestine movement, you've led international solidarity missions and humanitarian fleets. What lessons have you learned about leadership and empathy in high-stakes humanitarian work?
So, learning lessons, first thing is you don't have to be someone who should be having answers for all the questions. So normally when we look at a leader, like we look for answers from them. So what international work actually gave me the answers for my own questions, whether what kind of a leader I should be, that I don't have to answer all the questions. What I have to be is I have to be there. I have to be present for the people who is expecting me to give them answers. And being grounded and continuously learning, because when you just jump into international arena, it's not like you're just within your spectrum. You will have multi-layered academic background, experience, political people. So you will learn how you can manage conflict in different layers and different areas. Not just like if it's psychology, I just don't need to look into everything through psychology. So being someone with the international work gave me the perspective of what leadership exactly is, understanding the conflict, negotiation, and how I should move forward, understanding everybody's problems, and being able to not provide them a solution, but I can give them a different perspective of the conflict. So reframing it, looking at it from the outside, from the frame that I'm in, and you don't have to be all the time that if you can't do it, you don't have to carry that on your shoulders. You just can just give it to the rest of the team and you can get the help from them. So I always say that I like the wolf because how the wolf leads its pack. So it's the other way that we learn when it comes to schools and our environment and our societies. But international arena, international leadership is totally different from what we are doing within our circles. It's like the wolf. You lead from behind. You don't have to be in the front, and you just don't have to be ordering people to do this and do that, but you just do it with them in the same level. So I think that's the best lesson that I've taken from working with the international community.
Thank you, Samira. So I think you've just given us a powerful reminder that leadership in humanitarian context isn't just about logistics. Right? It's all about human dignity, compassion, being there for others. So I think it would be a really good opportunity now for me to just mention to everybody here that Samira is the Sri Lanka representative on the Global Sumud team, and she hopes to join one of the ships that is hoping to break the siege on Gaza when they leave, I think, in April, I think, this year.
April, yes.
So,
We are planning to sail again, second time, yeah, on April.
hats off to you, Samira. That courage, that bravery it's really fantastic. Over to Farzana.
Yes.
You've spoken at conferences about reconciling the roles of working women and the gender challenges that they face. What lessons from your own journey would you share with women navigating these dual responsibilities today?
Okay. So I think I would be more honest than try to be inspirational, going from the theme that we have today, because I think we have enough of inspiration, but not enough of solidarity, practical solidarity. So I would put it like this, right? The first lesson is, do not internalize the cost of a system that was not designed with us in mind. For example, courts do not sit, they sit at hours that conflict with your family obligations. When professional culture rewards people who don't have domestic responsibilities, professional culture seems to reward people who don't have domestic responsibilities. That's the situation we are in. And when client expectations always assume that you're readily available. Now, this is a structural problem, not a personal failing of ours, right? I can tell you that the weight of holding these multiple roles it's a real weight, and it doesn't happen easily. So one of the lessons is, one of the guidelines I think is to build whatever you are doing, your profession, your practice around your own values. And I chose to work predominantly in public law, for example, right? Which is not the most commercially rewarding and obvious path for a young lawyer entering the profession. And more specifically, I chose litigation in the late 1980s. If you speak to 10 young lawyers nowadays, they are most likely to tell you that their interest is in what they call corporate law, because that's where the money is. That's where the glamour is. Not in the law that I chose to practice, which is public law, right? But I wanted to be in a space where the work I did mattered, and the work was it connected the law to real outcomes for real people, right? So that conviction, in a way, really sustained me through the difficult periods in ways that a pure commercial motivation would not have done. Then, with regard to going back to your question on this, how do you manage and balance all of this out, the challenges, I have to tell you very clearly, there is no one particular magic answer to that. There is no magic potion that you can swallow and then come up as a success. And there's no version of a journey of playing multiple roles without external help from family, from colleagues, from support structures. The support structures are very limited. So it's mostly your own that helps you, because the institutional structure itself in Sri Lanka, talking for Sri Lanka, does not support such roles. Any professional success, if you call it success, is often at the expense of something else, another aspect of your life. But all of us women, we juggle those roles in various ways. And therefore, the myth that a self-sufficient woman or a woman can have it all and she can manage everything perfectly, I think is a very damaging and false narrative. It's very damaging and false to believe that it can be done alone. No, it cannot be done alone. It has to be done with external help. I also believe that the carer role that we play as women, right? Many of us have carer roles, whether it's for your parent, for your child, for your community. And people sometimes see us as distracted. In a professional space, that amount of attention you give in your role as carer is often seen as a distraction from professional exclusivity or excellence. So, but I think it is not a distraction. It is really a training in qualities that would eventually make a good lawyer. And I internalize it for my profession, and I think attention, patience, sensible judgment under pressure, that's important. And also the ability to hold multiple competing interests simultaneously and balance them all, those are actually good qualities of a proper professional lawyer. But when you're seen as a carer, then those are distractions. Those are regarded as distractions. Oh, she's constantly on leave. Those are the narratives. Or she's constantly not available. Or she constantly has to go to take care of a parent or a child. So that draws you down. So for me, as to what I would have done and what I would do, right, how I face those challenges is by always seeking support from my internal institution structure at home, and asking for help when necessary, and using all of that so that you can juggle this professional career, this professional role. You always get women being asked, how do you balance this? How do you balance this role? But you never get the men being asked, how do you manage being such a good father? How do you manage to do that? That question is rarely ever asked of men, because they don't have to balance anything. Because they do only one thing 90% of the time. They are required to do only excel in a professional manner. And that is what defines them as men. Some strong career is what defines them as men. But for us, you're defined as a woman if you play the traditional role in a traditional way. So yeah, so that is the reconciling of the roles is a tough one. Yes. Thank you.
Thanks for your honesty, Farzana. Your reflections remind us that women can lead both in their professions and in their personal lives, because you are a living example of that.
You can lead, yes, Tassie, you can lead only if you have constant support. You can't do it otherwise. Yeah, thank you. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Over to you, Farah. What do you believe are the most pressing challenges facing migrant and refugee women today? And how can organizations like yours, the ECCV, work with the government and communities to create meaningful change? Farah, you're on mute.
I do apologize. It's late here in Melbourne. I was just going to say that we're talking Australia, but I think these lessons are equally so for other societies. And I think that economic challenges are central to women's advancement. I think that when women have, but economic empowerment obviously is not of itself social empowerment. All of those things come together. But the ability for women to also make choices and advance in that way is also important. So I do think, if I had to say the most pressing challenge for women, it's economic insecurity, barriers to employment, and for refugee and migrant women here in Australia, language access, and access to services. These issues are often compounded by systemic barriers, such as when people come as migrants. It's an issue we're fighting about and trying to get change, limited recognition of overseas qualifications, or difficulty accessing culturally appropriate services. I was speaking to a very highly qualified Afghan woman some time ago. She had qualified as a doctor, but was unable to, get recognition as a doctor due to a very challenging method of, getting that recognition, and was working in something else. So, I think that those things are really a strong issue for women. But I think that but I think that social recognition, I acknowledge the point Farzana made about, you don't hold up the sky on your own. You have to have help. And that includes help from the systems and the institutions in which you are. Now, here in Australia, we have childcare. We don't, paid childcare and childcare subsidies, so that working women with children are supported to participate and earn their incomes through, paid childcare entitlements. And I think probably Norway is very advanced in that way, but I'm not sure about Sri Lanka. So when I visit Sri Lanka, and I was born there and I spent, my earliest years there, but I am very much not a local in the sense of having, lived there as an adult woman. But I do see issues, my own relatives benefit from, having reasonably prosperous lives. But I see many women of low income denied opportunity. And I think, opportunity and economic empowerment is key for me. And I would like to see Sri Lankan women, not just Muslim women, but across the board, have more opportunity and systemic opportunity. And I commend the Sri Lankan women here in this room who are clearly working towards that goal. But one step forward, two steps back so often when we try to push for change. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks. That was such an important reminder to, address these challenges head on. Thank you so much. Samira, moving on to you. As a master trainer in disaster preparedness, you've worked on integrating psychological first aid with emergency coordination. How important is mental resilience in disaster response, especially for women and families?
I didn't catch you at the last part.
You've been integrating psychological first aid with emergency coordination. So how important is mental resilience in disaster response, especially for women and their families? I think we saw it very recently with the cyclone, right?
Yeah. So if I talk about the mental resilience when it comes to disaster response, so especially as someone who is involved in first response, so we don't have much representation of women in the field of first aid and disaster response. Is because women are considered as, sensitive towards this kind of events, casualties, and this medical response or preparedness or emergency response is considered mainly can be handled by men because we are more sensitive towards these kind of issues. But I think women are more stronger when it comes to these kind of issues and mentally, because we saw during Ditwa mothers carrying their children on their shoulders and swimming through the waters. So mental resilience is something that is more needed than when it comes to physical fitness, because if you're physically fit, even though you're physically fit, if you're not mentally prepared to deal with that, you won't be able to move forward. Because we've seen so many people who are trapped in their own houses, men, well-built men who are trapped inside their houses, afraid of getting out of their homes. So our comrades had to go and rescue them, our rescuers had to go and rescue them. So preparedness, mentally being prepared for anything, I think it's a trait for women. We are more prepared for things that's upcoming. That's Sri Lankan saying that normally there's a men used to say in Sinhala. I don't know, everybody will understand that. Gyanunge mole handimite. Right? It says that the women, their ability, their cognition is in the spoon that they used to cook. Right?
Okay.
It's not exactly that, but women are more comprehensible. Their cognition is more stronger than men. That is why that we can juggle and multitask. So in medical response, So, I mean, psychological support was mainly provided by women who was given special training during Ditwa, because their ability to cope up, sympathize, empathize with people, and understand their level of trauma, because women are more sensible than men. In my opinion, I don't, people might vary with but women are more sensible in my experience, because I work with men majority, because I'm the only woman in my field. And when it comes to training the military, training the police, or working abroad, so I just have to, bring them to a level that, okay, right, this is how you have to understand this situation. So it's not like you're just responding mechanically, but you have to understand their perception, right? And when it comes to response, we have two ways of responding. One is the primary care and the secondary care. So in secondary care, we totally speak about the aftermath for the victim and aftermath for the first aider or the responder, because women are being able to handle situations which are critically very, very difficult to comprehend, like a death. So first aiders who are females, they are far more better in reverting back to another responding rather than men, because they just have to take a little break to go back to another task. So this is my understanding, and this is with my experience. Psychologically, women are more built and stronger than men. They can handle more situations, and I think more women should come into response and disaster preparedness. And I will be the happiest person to see women represent this field of disaster response, because I'm the only single person within Sri Lanka who is working with the military with this kind of disaster response. So psychological response, psychological trauma response, and psychological first aid is very important, and it should be incorporated with the system, and especially with men and women, because without you understanding the mentality of the person who's in front of you, you won't be able to provide them a proper response. Securing them from a place is not what the basic need is. Securing them and stabilizing them is what medical response is.
And for those of you who didn't know, Samira was part of the GGG family. She was in the St. John's ambulance service, right? The medical services there.
St. John Ambulance Brigade, yeah.
St. John's Brigade, yes, thank you. So Samira, what I'm also hearing is that mental resilience is often overlooked, right? It's often overlooked, but it's central to recovery and building lives, isn't it? Okay.
It is.
Thank you so much, Samira. Farzana, moving on to you.
Yes.
Having served as a justice of appeal in Fiji and represented Sri Lanka internationally, what insights have you gained about how different countries approach gender equity in the legal sphere?
Okay. So in the brief service period that I had visiting as a visiting justice in Fiji, and that period gave me a kind of a bird's eye but a comparative view that I could not have obtained through conferences or academic study alone. And I think the insights I gained, I would say, are like this. So sitting on a bench in a different jurisdiction, deciding matters in under a variety of subjects, what happens is that you absorb the institutional culture in a way that is actually very qualitatively different from if you were personally observing it outside that system. Right? And what has struck me most, I think, is that countries that make the most, I would say, most substantial progress on gender equity in the law are not necessarily those countries that have a sophisticated legislative framework. Not necessarily so. They are the ones that address the pipeline consistently and early. So when women reach critical mass in the judiciary, for example, the judiciary, not just a token appointment at the apex level, but actual meaningful positions, the systematic presence of these women in all tiers you see an institutionalized culture which begins and then shifts and kind of transforms the whole system. And I think from what we are speaking, it appears that even from Samira's insights, what I seem to understand is that her observation is that in times of difficulty, in times of distress, women are mentally more resilient, psychologically more capable of handling a multitude of difficult moments. And I think that mental resilience, it is how we are wired. My answer, as a non-scientist, my answer is that that is how Allah has created us. We are wired differently from the men. We are wired differently. And that is why I think, and I've said this before in my other discussions, that I think we are the preferred gender because Allah chose us as the bearers of the human race over the men. So to me, and that must mean something in the overall scheme of things, right? So having said that, if you look at approaching gender equity, coming back to your question, what are the insight you have gained from these different experiences about how different countries approach gender equity? So I can't claim to know how different countries approach it because I haven't done a scholarly study on that. So it can be Sri Lanka, and it can be maybe my period of being a judge in Fiji, if I look at it like that, right? But my experiences, both local and international, it reinforced another insight. One thing is that there is danger in transplanting legal solutions from one country without also transplanting the social conditions that made them work. So though Sri Lanka, we have borrowed extensively, say, from Indian and English laws, right? And that has been productive. But gender equity measures that succeeded in one country may not meaningfully translate completely into another country unless that second country has three basics. There must be a proper enforcement infrastructure. There must be social legitimacy for what you're trying to do, and the political will to have it all. Like taking from what Farah says, she says, I hope this whole, where policymakers, when policies are being made, women have to be there. And if I were to take that point and carry it further, one of my favorite jurists is the famous American Justice of the Supreme Court, Ruth Bader Ginsburg. And what she said was, women must be there in every room when decisions are being made. It's not about being at the top or at the bottom, but they must be there in every room when decisions are being made. So what I can carry from this is that Sri Lanka, we have a great constitutional framework and we have all of the legal documentation. But I don't think the approach of bringing gender equity into the legal space, I don't see it as being consistent, and I don't see it being institutionalized as much as it should. So the approach is whatever may be the case, I feel there's inertia in implementing it. That is there.
Yeah. So what you're saying is, like, while context could differ, we can still learn so much from these cross-border experiences.
You can learn from the cross-border experience, but the fact is each country approaches it differently, and it is very politically driven. It is very politically driven. It is not driven by any other innate desire or passion to help women to better their lives. No, it is very politically driven, at least in how I have seen it. Yeah.
Thank you, Farzana. Farah, getting back to you, the multicultural advocacy often emphasizes inclusion and representation. We've sorted that part out. But critics argue that progress can be slow and symbolic rather than transformative. Do you believe Australia's institutions are genuinely committed to dismantling the systematic barriers for migrants and refugee women? Or are we still stuck in a cycle of tokenism? What are your thoughts? Farah, unmute yourself, please.
I'm very slow. I've now unmuted myself. Thank you. Look, I just wanted to say that many of you who know Australia may have seen, some unpleasant things recently with like in the UK and in Europe, the rise of some elements of the far right. We've had some anti-immigration marches, etc. Australia, of course, the original people who lived in Australia are the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples, and they are the people from this country has come, and everybody else is an immigrant. So, and Australia's history of race relations has been, from the point of view of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people, a very ugly one. One that has, been righted to some extent, obviously, and we are now an immigrant nation, and our first original inhabitants are very generous in welcoming us. They are some of the most welcoming people to migrants. But even so, Australia's early history has been, as I say, a fractured and difficult one. But we are now an immigrant nation, and I mentioned, the close to 300 languages, the multiple cultures, etc. So that is a really strong feature of Australian life. And Australia has an immigration policy, one in which they often pick the best and brightest from all over the world. There's been a bit of a brain drain in Sri Lanka. Many of them can be found in Melbourne. But I'm happy to see lots of really brainy people are still in Sri Lanka, as evidenced by our interlocutor and as our participants. But my point is that institutions have shifted. There is equity embedded, more or less, but actually, we haven't seen that extraordinary transformation. Our politics is dominated by Anglo-Celtic Australians. We have in recent elections, the gender piece has certainly improved considerably, but we haven't seen the refugee, multicultural, particularly new and emerging communities represented in politics. I think in our public hospitals and our medical professions, it's better. There are so many immigrant doctors working in our systems and improving lives, in our aged care systems similarly, but there's still a long way to go. And Australia, even though it's an island situated in Asia, we're not alien to all these global things we're seeing in, Anglo-Celtic Western societies. There's a lot of fear. Some of that comes from economic issues, and the pie is contracting, and so there's a lot of challenges here. People might be wondering what's in that background behind me. I chose that as my background because actually those are. It's a campaign, a poster campaign that an artist has been conducting in our major cities. All of those people behind me are early Australians, actually original Australians, not people who've come in the last 10 or 20 years. And that term Aussie sort of captures that broader immigration experience. So look, there are many systemic challenges. There's lots of good intentions. We hear all the time, diversity is our greatest strength. My organization and colleague organizations is here to say, where's the proof in the pudding? But issues of racism, etc., and cultural tensions, of course, are very well known to Sri Lankans as well. And Muslim Australians, may I add, are facing some considerable challenges in Australia as they are in Norway and other societies. Wars, there are very complex geopolitical factors at play, but also very ugly racism as well. But Australia is on the road to progress still, but one step forward, two steps back, and then you have to get back on that ladder. Yeah.
Thank you, Farah. I think your insights have really helped us confront reality. We tend to forget what's happening out there. Tamina, question for you. You've spoken about being driven by global injustice. What issues do you believe demand urgent reform, and how can local politics contribute to global change?
I think global injustice always trickles down into local injustice in our small societies and neighborhoods. So I think sometimes we tend to overwhelm ourselves with the global perspective without realizing how much it affects us and our everyday lives. And I think the first thing that I want to mention is that the world needs our attention. We have great difficulties and ongoing issues in Palestine, in Iran, Sudan, Yemen, everywhere that have great global impacts. So we should not shy away from speaking on those topics. But I think to bring it down to a more local perspective, there are especially two things that I think would also resonate with more people here, as we're from very diverse backgrounds. The first thing is safety, because in many of the larger cities around the world, we see that the crime rates are increasing. And it's important to remind ourselves that the reason why crime rates are increasing is because of social injustice. And it is pivotal for us, no matter gender really, to make a change, because children and youngsters and even adults, they don't commit crime because they want to, but often it starts because they need to. They feel a sense of loneliness, non-inclusion. And for us to create a safe environments where our kids can grow up to be healthy, good, happy adults is extremely important also for what they would impact to change later on in their lives. And this tags along with my second point, that we feel even in one of the world's richest countries, in Norway, but everywhere else as well, that things are expensive. People don't feel they can, the affordability is quite low. And we even saw Mayor Zoran Mamdani in New York, who kind of shook the world with his very cool and different campaign based on exactly this affordability for New Yorkers. And I even see it with my own eyes that even in, one of the safest cities in the world, in the richest country in the world, people are struggling to send their kids to football practices, even struggling to provide sufficiently, be it food, shelter, clothes. And these are all shaped by global trends. But it is our duty as local politicians and socially engaged people to make that everyday lives of people, for everyone, no matter gender, color, race, to make it better than what it used to be. So I think those are the two very specific things that would later on have a great impact and actually create a bit more of a just world.
Thank you, Tamin. I think you are a prime example of local leadership that can ripple outwards. Thank you so much. On to our final round. I know we're running out of time, and very quick fire round, hopefully. Farzana, if you could leave one message with young women entering the legal profession today, what would it be?
Yeah. So let me start by saying that I will confine my answer to litigation in the legal profession. Because the legal profession, there's the practice of the law in the courtroom and there's the practice of the law in the boardroom. So you can do one of those. So I will not profess to give an answer to people in the boardroom. That's not what I've done. I've done the courtroom. So I can offer a few thoughts on that. And that's a broad question. So my couple of things, and I would say if you're going into the courtroom, the one you say, give one lesson. But I think that must be preceded by a few other things before you get to that. So there's no concept of being over-prepared, and you must never underestimate the strength of your opponent or his case. You have to master the facts so thoroughly that you know his case better than he knows his own case. I think that is the way that you can do the best for your client, right? And, the legal profession, litigation can become a very kind of a self-referential setup. We can spend our whole careers in the mechanics of dispute resolution without ever sitting back to think, for whom is this system operating? Who is this system supposed to be serving? Because as lawyers, your ego can get in the way. So young women entering the profession, young people entering the profession today, they have an opportunity to, and a responsibility both, to ensure that there is technical excellence in their knowledge and moral seriousness about them actually understanding what the law is for. So, in my experience as a counsel for the state, both in the original and the appellate courts, and having played the role of legal advisor to the government on various legal questions, having also sat as a judge on the other side, just not litigator, but also having sat on the other side, and now back again as a private practitioner, I think we continue to test the capacity of the law to deliver justice in some of the most hardest cases. So one thing I know is that the law, it is not a self-executing thing. You don't press a button and get an answer. You can't put a set of facts into it and get an answer. There's a huge human element involved, and that human element is the lawyer, right? So it requires people of courage and skill to give it meaning. So you can have all the law in the books, but unless you as a lawyer take it on and properly guide your client, no amount of perfect law is going to help. So there will be, as a lawyer, you will have these moments of challenge. And the easier path might be attractive. The quiet role might be attractive. Do not rock the boat. They might tell you, don't rock the boat. Don't take that case, right? Don't take the difficult brief. Don't challenge the procedural irregularity in a government system. Don't raise an argument, though it needs to be raised. Don't raise it because the repercussions will be worse. So my guidance or my advice to younger people would be, when you're grappling with situations like that, we in Sri Lanka, a couple of years ago during COVID, we faced difficulties as a community. And that was a time when people should have stood up and done what they had to do. But it was only very few people who did it, right? It was a systemic, institutionalized kind of discrimination. So for the young lawyers, you will face situations like that where you will not have the chance to do what you want. I think in that moment of difficulty, I would say your training will tell you what the law says. What you have studied at law school will tell you what the law says. But your values must tell you what to do with that training. So I would say, be the lawyer that marries both, does both. No,
Thank you, Faizana.
that is
Yes,
what
I
I
think
would say. Thank you. Yeah.
really good. Lovely
Yeah.
advice. Thank you so much. Farah, if you could leave one message with women about embracing their strength and shaping their future, what would it be?
I would say that your voice matters and your experience matters, and don't wait for permission from anyone to to take position, to volunteer, to contribute, and climb. Whatever power structures are present. And they don't have to be climbing to the top. You can make enormous differences at the grassroots level. And I think we've seen that emerge as a theme in tonight's discussion. So there are many levels in which you can influence outcomes, including at the family level. When I reflect on my own grandmother, in Sri Lanka, she was denied my maternal grandmother. I didn't know my paternal grandmother. She predeceased me, my maternal grandmother was a woman of extraordinary intelligence. She would get up at 6 a.m. in the morning, read Quran, and listen to the news. She was someone who was very ambitious for her granddaughters as she was for her grandsons, and in fact for her daughters and sons as well. But particularly as the oldest granddaughter, she put a lot of emphasis on me. And I remember confessing to a very unambitious career ambition, and she gave me a slap, a gentle one, and encouraged me to step up. She wanted me to be a doctor, but I ended up studying law and went into journalism and other areas. But my point is that there's so much strength in our Muslim communities. Our grandmothers, our mothers, our aunts, our uncles, and I'd like to see greater recognition, but also they don't need permission from anyone to step up. And I'm so pleased to be amongst a group of strong women here tonight, even if there was some dissension in the chat about what people were saying. You have permission to say whatever you want to say, and people can take issue with that. But yes, thank you.
Thank you. That's very inspiring. Thank you, Farah. Tamina, as someone balancing politics, science, entrepreneurship, and education, what message would you share with young women who aspire to lead across multiple fields?
An advice that I often get from my own parents is to stay true to myself and my core values. And that is harder than one would imagine in a world where genuinity could often be a hurdle to attain power and to create change, because you do need power to create that change that we're all discussing here. And also, I think, especially my mother and my grandmother have been, and even my grandfather who has passed away, they always emphasize this part of me embracing my femininity, but also my Islam, because these are two powerhouses that you could use to your advantage. And I think many women, especially young women, often in the West, feel that it's very hard to be a visible Muslim, but even just being different. But acknowledging that if you embrace your differentness, being different could be very cool. And also, it gives you this quite important and unique layer of understanding how the world and our societies are built and the needs that people have. And also, the final point that I've been thinking about, also watching the discussion in the chat and afterwards here in the panel as well, is I think it's so important for us to create our village. But to create your village, you also have to be a villager. So it's divided into, in one way, we have to create a society, a support system that would help us drive that positive change that we want to. And that means showing up in these panels, exchanging numbers, helping each other, giving each other advice, but also courage, inspiration, and being each other's cheerleaders. But it also means that you have to be vulnerable and you have to give in to others. We have to help to build each other up, because bringing it back to the Norwegian context, me and the two other Sri Lankan women, we cannot represent all Sri Lankan or all minority women in Norway because we don't represent them. They have different needs than us. We could try to understand, but we will never fully understand them. So I think it's very important that we help to build each other up, being cheerleaders, and also staying true to our core values. Because I think if you lose your values, then your change will be quite insincere.
Yeah, thank you so much, Tamina. Really wonderful insights there. Samira, ignore the chat. Balancing your demanding professional commitments with motherhood, what message would you share with women who are striving to lead while nurturing their families? Because you're doing a really good job of it.
So I think being a mother is...
The hadith, which is narrated by Abdullah bin Mas'ud and one of Islam's most reliable and trustworthy transmitters of hadith, goes as follows. Muhammad called on him to accompany him on a trip to the desert.
Can someone please mute all the microphones? Thank you.
Oh.
Go ahead, Samira.
Okay. So being a mother makes me more compassionate towards my work, because when a woman becomes a mother,
he describes them as, quote,
we become like, when we are young women and when we are turning into a mother, our perspective towards the world and people changes, because we bring in a life to the world. So we tend to understand the value of life, and we nurture and these children, so we are more compassionate towards another life, right? So my children, when I look into the world and when I look into my children, I don't see a difference, because I become more empathetic and I become more caring towards the other person who is right next to me, because I can fit into their shoes. So being a mother is inspiring, and being a mother is what makes us stronger, because a mother can take on the entire world for her children. So that strength a mother has is what's driving me towards helping others, working in these fields, helping who is vulnerable, and being one of Asia's women who are into disaster response, and someone who is working with Global Sumud. So I think it's my strongest trait. And I would say, mothers, you are more inspirational. You don't have to be an academic, you don't have to be a professional. Mothers, you are in your own shoes, you're inspirational. You are like, you're juggling your work, you're looking after your children, you're sick, but you're looking after your kids, you're looking after your household, you're supporting your husband in various ways. So that's your strongest trait, or of a woman, if I understand it, because in my perspective, that's how I feel it about being a mother. And my children are my strongest allies when it comes to my profession, my activism, anything regarding what I do, because they inspire me to be a better person for them, so I can be a better person to the other person who is right next to me.
Thank you so much, Simran. It shows that strength and empathy can coexist, right? And the family can be a source of power in
Absolutely.
a woman's leadership. All right. Thank you so much. Ladies, I am in awe of what we've just heard. Thank you so much for that fantastic discussion. I would now like to call upon the leader of the Gender Equality Subsection of the World Forum for Sri Lankan Muslims, Rizana Zubair, to acknowledge the work that has been put into arranging this webinar. Over to you, Rizana.
Thank you, Tazi. What an exhilarating session that was. And what a way to kick off the International Women's Day weekend. Thank you, ladies. 4 phenomenal women. You have blown our minds. And I don't have much time, only 2 minutes to go. And so I'm going to just blitz you off with the thank yous. So Farzana, Farah, Tamina, and Samira, thank you so much. Your input was amazing. And I can just go on and on, but I'm going to cut myself short. I just need to also thank our able moderator, Tazi Dahlan. What a fantastic job you did. Thoughtful questions, seamlessly moving on from person to person. Every voice was heard and every opinion was heard. Thank you so much. And I'd also like to thank Shazmina Sharifdin, the leader of the Strategic Communications and Media Subcommittee, a mouthful. I hope I got all that. And this was actually her brainchild. And she reached out to me in the gender equality group and said, shall we do this? And I said, yes. And of course, when we women decide we want to do something, we are unstoppable. So thank you to everyone. And also Shazmina, she's in Qatar, and she was making the flyers and making the preparations with drones flying overhead. Thank you. We really appreciate your work and the work of your team. Coming to my dream team in the Gender Equality team subcommittee, thank you so much for your support. Amjad Salim, your input is always welcome, and your Vice Counsel, Ziada Toki, I count on you all the time to give us direction. And everybody else, thank you for your support. Next, I'd like to thank our chairman, Rizwan Wahab, and Hazim Hamza, who's quietly managing things, admin behind the scenes. Thank you so much for supporting us and supporting our collaboration, the collaboration of the 2 subcommittees. Finally, who did I miss? I think I got everyone. Of course, thank you to each and every one of you who's logged in today, who's contributed in the chat, and also given your likes, your we really appreciate you spending your time with us in Ramadan and spending time with us today. Thank you so much. On behalf of the World Forum for Sri Lankan Muslims and the two subcommittees, I hope this conversation is carried on even after we log off, because it's too valuable to let it go. So leave your response in the chat, just one word would do, and we'll see you maybe next year if we have enough interest. We'll carry on. Thank you. And thank you for joining us, everyone.
Thank
Good
you,
night.
everyone. Good night.
Thank you so much, everyone. Assalamu alaikum.
Thank you so much.